Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm Mark Graven, and our guest today is Merit Kahn. She is, among other things, a sales expert. She's a certified emotional intelligence expert. She's a business speaker, and she is CEO of her training company, SELLect Sales Development. So before I tell you a little bit more about her, Merit, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Mark. It's nice to be here.
And we're going to have a really good conversation today. We'll put links to the show notes, links in the show notes to Merit's company and profile. But SELLect Sales Development, it's SELL, all in capitals. Real quick, what's the story behind the name?
Well, our mission in the world is to help people stop selling and start getting selected. But it really is all about the sell. And so we spell it SELL, all in caps, ECT.com, or actually it's SELLectSales.com. It's not great for SEO, but it really is the mission of our business to help you stop selling and start getting selected.
So I think that's a really interesting idea, why a salesperson would say stop selling. So we'll dig into that a little bit later on. But Merit has coached and trained entrepreneurs and sales teams for more than 20 years. She's also a stand-up comedian. And I think we're going to talk about that as well. What's the difference between, I saw you had a one-woman show. That's different than doing like a stand-up set of jokes and stories?
Yeah, it's a little different. I started out doing stand-up. So in stand-up, you want a tight 10, they call it, like a good 10-minute set you could travel with and perform at the drop of a hat. And after I built my tight 10, and I did that a few times, so I wanted to string them together and perform a little bit more, adding some stories and some inspiration and some lessons learned and things like that. So it was more of a theatrical experience. So I created a one-woman show with costume changes and a set, and it allowed me to weave those sets together and add in some of the other things I like, which is leaving people better than I found them, which I can't help it. Even in my comedy, I try to pass along a few lessons learned. I'm always talking about my mistakes.
Well, then you're in the right place. I think that's part of how I found you to come be on the show today. So there's so much more that we can revisit, and we've set the stage for topics we can come back to. But we always do like to jump right into the main question that we always pose to guests. Merit, what would you say is your favorite mistake?
My favorite mistake was on a sales call really early in my career, thankfully, because it really set the stage for a big lesson that really changed the direction of how I occurred with my own clients, and now how I teach people and all of it. But I had just learned this technique, and it was the name of it was negative reverse selling. And so the concept was that somebody would say, like my prospect said to me, well, I really like what you're saying. Like this really sounds like it would be a good fit. And instead of saying, oh, great, let's write it up, or like, let's talk more, the technique had me say, really? I'm surprised to hear you say that. Like, I wasn't getting that sense. Like, what did I miss? And so I kept doing that. Like every time they said something positive, I would go negative. And that's how I learned the technique. And I would just like, really? I'm not sure. And, can you do this? And I'm like, I don't know. Why would that be important to you? And I was so immersed in getting the technique right that I was completely disconnected from the actual conversation. It was all about me, like being able to report back to my sales trainer that I did this technique properly, instead of really listening to what the prospect had to say and responding appropriately and helping them to come to the conclusion that we were in fact a good match, that I did have a good solution to their problem. And so in that moment, from that mistake, I learned, I did not get that deal, by the way. So it was a costly mistake in truth. But as I debriefed that whole conversation happily immediately after, I learned the lesson pretty quickly. And I was able to distinguish for myself that it's never going to be a good idea to be so concerned with something that's about me getting something right at the expense of really being present with whoever I'm in a conversation with.
So, I mean, it sounds like there's like the very specific lesson about when or how to use that technique. But then I also like how you sort of generalize that. What I hear you saying is don't focus so much on the method that you lose sight of the moment.
Ah, mic drop right there. That was, yes, perfect. Exactly.
Well, but I think I picked up some of this language from your website, though. So now I feel like I've stolen. You don't want to be that stand-up who steals someone else's jokes.
No,
I didn't
no,
mean to steal your words that you used there, but
well, I love it. No wonder I loved it. I didn't even know I wrote that, but that's good. Yay.
I didn't steal it. I'm just influenced by you. Is that okay?
Yes, that's perfect.
Well, but so to dig, I'm just curious to hear a little bit more about the situation. Like, what? Tell me a little more about the intent of, negative reverse selling. Is it like reverse psychology where you're letting the person sell themselves instead of feeling like they're being pushed?
Yeah, I feel like the intention, it's a good idea. And it is a little bit based on that, that psychology, reverse psychology. It's really about helping somebody to get beneath the surface. Because a lot of people will say, like if I were to ask you, like, how's your day? And you say, oh, it's a good day. Most of us would just take that at face value. Oh, okay, Mark's having a good day. Moving on to the next thing. And negative reverse selling would have you say, like, really, Mark? Because it doesn't look like it's a great day for you right now. So you're kind of like pushing the envelope a little bit to get just below the surface, because in sales, the prospect is never really going to give you the right question. They're really, it's not like they're trying to be mean or manipulative, but they're just being protective, right? They're, salespeople. And that's why we say stop selling, start getting selected, is because salespeople traditionally have been trained to be pushy and aggressive and salesy. And the only defense that prospects have in that situation is to keep the cards close to the vest, to push back. And so in traditional selling, you had to come up with a strategy, a technique to battle against the problem you created by being pushy. Mm-hmm. And so what we do, what we teach at SELLect Sales Development is to stop doing all of that pushy stuff. So we actually don't need to teach a tactic like negative reverse selling, because it's unnecessary in a world where you're well trained to set strong expectations, to ask good questions, to bring the defense wall down, and to have real, honest conversations with prospects about the challenges that they really do have. And if you're an appropriate solution, how to talk about that in a way that honors everybody's triggers and emotional intelligence and all of it. So that's why we don't need that anymore.
Yeah. Well, were there signs that the prospect was maybe getting annoyed or frustrated with the approach? Were there signals that you didn't pick up on? I mean, because you said you didn't get the deal, but how did you close the loop to realize that that approach you took had not been effective?
I thought a little bit about that, because I figured you might ask me a question like that. Mm-hmm. How did I know that I got it wrong? In this case, and this is not something I am proud of, but I will say it on your podcast to live in eternity. In this case, the prospect literally said to me, Merit, you should really have a little bit more confidence in what you're selling.
Wow.
Just totally stopped me in my tracks. I've been accused of a lot of things. Never in my life low confidence. Like that was never one of the issues. So that really, it was so obvious to them that I had done this technique so incredibly bad that it showed up like like low confidence. And imagine really talking to somebody that you think has low confidence and being very straightforward to say directly to them, it appears like you have low confidence. Like you have to have really destroyed any level of confidence that you may have. I was so disappointed. I was so embarrassed. And I had never heard that ever in my life. And it really stopped me in my tracks. But it obviously many years later, I can look back in that moment and say, that really was the learning that turned it around, because it was in that moment that I realized that technique training alone wasn't going to be the thing that was going to have me be successful in sales or as a business owner, entrepreneur, or basically in anything, right? It was going to be the downfall. And so I had to look at, well, what else is important? And that's where I really developed the language of the framework that I teach still today, which is that there are 3 things that are important in being successful. And that's mindset and mechanics, right? The nuts and bolts, the techniques, but also being in motion, right? So all 3 of those things, mindset, mechanics, and motion, really need to be working together. And because I was so uber focused on just getting the mechanics of sales right at the expense of the other 2, it actually took away some of the strong mindset and beliefs that I had. It was overpowering. It was overshadowing that aspect. And what I learned was to get those more in balance. And once I really put some focus on getting those in balance, everything in my business changed for the better.
Yeah. Well, and what you're saying resonates with me, because I think of the consulting work that I do and colleagues do. There are mechanics, there are methods that you learn. And I think there's always a risk. It sounds like what happened to you is you learn something new. I mean, you said this, you learn something new, you want to go use that tool. Like, I've got a shiny new hammer. I'm going to go look for nails. I'm going to use it. And like a parallel to some of the work I do, there's often an emphasis on trying to coach by asking questions, of not being too directive, not telling. But there are times where you've got to read the room, where the questions, like you can tell the person you're coaching, is just getting annoyed. Like, they've asked you a question, you answer with a question that sometimes creates tension. And then you've got to think, okay, well, I just took this class on leading by asking questions. Maybe I should step back from that a little bit.
I couldn't agree with that more. In fact, there is a whole segment that we teach on asking questions and questioning techniques and strategies and softening statements and different things. And I always start it by saying, now, look, you're going to learn some good questioning techniques today. And the rule is you're not allowed to use them on me. Like, if I ask you a question, just answer the question in this class setting, because sometimes, again, that's a perfect example of a scenario where people get really excited about what they've learned and they can't wait to use it, and then they misuse it. And it's okay to take something a little too far to test it, right? But do that in low risk situations. In my case, I practiced a technique on something that in a scenario where that really was a legitimately well-qualified prospect with a very good opportunity. And in those cases in particular, I think it's best to trust what you've learned in training and coaching situations. And then your best move is to be present. What's there for you, what's authentic to your new style, what you've learned and embodied will shine through when you need it. And what's not authentic to you, what's not really part of how you have a natural conversation, this is not the time and place to practice. Practice in low risk situations and with good opportunities. Be in the moment, and that will take you a lot farther.
So, Merit, I want to come back and talk more about the sales training that you do and some of the things you teach. But I want to maybe detour into the work you do on stage. Being a stand-up comedian has got to be something that requires a high level of confidence to be vulnerable that way, to be up on stage. It's just you and a microphone and a stool and a bottle of water or a drink. At what point do you So I'm curious that when you've got your tight 10, you've got your jokes lined up, sort of like you've learned a sales technique. Like at what point do you have to adjust and read the room based on here's what I planned on doing, but I don't know if this is working.
Well, that could be a whole nother mistake episode, Mark. But I'll tell you a real life story. So when I started doing comedy, it was 2014. I was married at the time. My jokes are, I think good comedy is very personal. So I'm not joking about observations, and many comedians have done that and done that very, very successfully. What my style of comedy is to find the humor in things that frustrate me or upset me. And I look for what's funny about this. And that's where I mean, it's a good life coping strategy. Anyway, so at the time, my marriage was a little bit more difficult than I would have liked. And so my jokes were like, ha ha ha, my husband is great. And he thinks so too. It was just soft, but it was playful. And then as the marriage deteriorated, the jokes got a little bit meaner. And by the time we got to 2016, my comedy coach actually told me there were several jokes that I wrote that I was not allowed to do on stage because they had crossed the line. They were too mean. Wow. And that's when she informed me that my marriage wasn't going to work. So, it's just comedy, life, sales, it's all connected, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, I was in Toronto, Canada, and I was there for a week for a business consulting project. And I decided to go to a comedy club and ask for a few minutes on stage to, like an open mic night type of thing. And at that time, so it was a Wednesday night, it was probably 11:30 by the time I got on stage. And the people that were in the audience at that time of the evening during the week are younger. We'll just say that they were younger than I was. They hadn't maybe quite had as many life experiences as I had. And so all of my jokes at that time were about my marriage. And so I got on stage, and literally the people that were sitting right at the front, I could hear them talking to each other. And they said, wow, she's a little mean, isn't she? And
that's about telling your two banned mean jokes.
Right. I didn't even tell my mean jokes. But so imagine, right? I'm in Canada where everybody's nice and very polite. And it's a very young 20-something audience. And I was definitely not 20-something. So my jokes weren't appropriate. They weren't a match for the audience. Just like in a sales situation, if I'm not listening to my prospect and my solutions are not an appropriate match for what their problems are, we've missed the boat. And the sooner I can figure that out in a sales situation, the better. The sooner I can figure that out with a comedy audience, like look around, who is here? Which of my, jokes are going to land with this audience? What are the appropriate solutions, jokes for this audience? And I bombed horribly that night in Toronto. I'm not sure I'm even allowed back in the country. But
I think none of us are right now, it seems.
Oh, that's probably true. But I learned also a good lesson that night, which was, I didn't have a wide repertoire of jokes at that time. And so now that I recognize that, now I actually have organized my set in terms of, this is going to be a set that's really going to hit it for an audience that's mostly male. This is going to be a set that an older audience is going to like. This is going to be a set that, ladies' night out is I'm going to crush it with the ladies. So I really kind of take a look at the audience, and then I can select the jokes that really will be the best match for what they need. Because it's not about what I think is funny. It's about what they think is going to be funny.
It does seem like, wow, there are some really strong parallels. And you reference back to our guest, to recap a little bit, is Merit Kahn. Her company is SELLect Sales SELLect Sales Development. And she teaches something called my most recent mistake. she teaches something called the SELLect Sales System. So is there a parallel when you talk about selecting different jokes or groups of jokes that might apply to a situation? Direct parallel then to what people can do in the course of sales?
Yeah, that's a really fascinating question, Mark. I've never been asked that one. Give me a second.
Okay.
I think that what's there for me, I always go back to my anchor, which is in business what I call the open for business framework, and that's that mindset, mechanics, motion. So anytime I'm really trying to connect the dots between two different things, what's common to everything, where all the answers are, is somewhere in that framework: mindset, mechanics, motion. So when I think about those two worlds and the differences and also the similarities, like in comedy, if I'm not in the right frame of mind to take that stage, it really doesn't matter how well I know my jokes. I might be able to kind of like sleepwalk through the set a little bit, but it will be a different experience for the audience. It won't be nearly as good as when I'm really plugged in, when I'm feeling confident, when I even like what my outfit is, like some of these little things that just give you that extra little boost. And so, and motion in that world is, having enough at bats. They say if you really don't get to count yourself a comedian until you have had your bomb on stage. And that is the reason that comics go to open mic nights and they're testing new material and things, because there's a big difference between me writing something in my comedy journal that I think is funny and then getting the words right and seeing how the audience reacts. And you can't just test a joke one time. I guess this is a good parallel, much like you might have an offer for your business. And if you extend that offer to a prospect and they don't accept it, it may not be that the offer isn't appropriate. It may be that there's something going on in that prospect's world that doesn't make it a match for them to take advantage of that offer or select to use that offer in that moment. And so the same thing with comedy. It may be that the joke is good, but there was something with my delivery. I didn't sell it. There's something with the audience. Sometimes it's the room, right? There's so many factors, and we have to learn to isolate and isolate what the real root of the issue is, so that we don't duplicate those mistakes, so that we can learn from those experiences. And that's why I found that open for business framework, because being open for business is more than just like having the sign on the door or having open business hours. It's an action, it's an attitude. And so I look at that framework as the anchor for everything. I can always look to see, did that experience not go well because of a mindset? Is there something I believe about that experience that had it go south? Is there something I'm bringing from a mindset or emotional perspective that's not connecting? Is it a mechanics issue? Did I just forget the punchline? Did I try to sell features and benefits instead of asking questions about their real issues? Right. So there's always mindset, mechanics, motion. The answer is always somewhere in there.
Yeah. Now, to those watching on YouTube, they can see there's a pillow over Merit's left shoulder that says, "Are you open to ... And there's a picture of you holding that on your website, so I can tell the pillow is important. Is that connected to the open for business framework, or is there some other meaning or connection?
It is. Well, first of all, in our virtual world, I do a lot of Zoom meetings, as I'm sure all of your audience does. And the pillow is great for two things. Number one, I'm constantly looking at my own little square on the screen, and it reminds me, am I open to whatever it is that they're saying in the square next to me? And that's a good reminder for me, because especially I'll put myself in the category, any expert, any consultant, any advisor, any professional who knows their stuff we get very excited when somebody asks us a question and we want to respond quickly and share our expertise. And I have to remember and remind myself, am I open to really understanding what their issue is? Am I open to listening more and talking less, right? So it says a lot of things to me, but it also is a great visual for the people that I'm talking to, because they're looking at my face and somehow they're reminded, am I open to what she's saying? And I can't sell anything. I can't even be selected until somebody else is open to my offers, is open to receiving, and is open to new possibilities. Yesterday, I was doing a leadership training for all of the top executives for a big global company. And one of the questions we spent almost an hour on was the question that I posed to them was, have you already decided it can't get any better? Or are you open to a new possibility? And we really looked at that question from a lot of different angles, but it's a wonderful question. First, as leaders to ask ourselves. It's also a great question for leaders to ask everybody else that is on their team, all the way down throughout an organization. And it's great for asking our prospects. Like, before we talk about all of our offers and all the things that we've done, to help clients that have been in your situation, have you already decided that your situation can't get any better, or are you open to a new possibility? And really, for the years that I spent training people what to say and how to close deals and all of the sales techniques and process and all of that, none of that makes any difference until somebody is open to hearing the opportunity that is there for them. And so now I spend a lot of my time speaking at conferences, speaking to leadership, and really just opening their minds to new possibilities. And honestly, it's really just as simple as that 4-word question. Are you open to?
I think that's a good reminder for myself as a podcast host. There was a list of questions that I planned on asking, and they had been jotted down in a certain order. Am I open to what my guest is saying? Am I forcing the conversation in a certain direction, or is it more of a dance? Hopefully it's more of a dance where, I have a plan. This isn't exactly improv, but to be adaptable, not being so focused on the mechanics of my questions, but being more in the moment with what you're saying as a guest. I was going to ask, because I've never taken an improv class. I have colleagues, or I've interviewed some people who have. I'm curious if you've taken an improv class, because that requires an openness to whoever you're interacting with. Is that different than you as a stand-up interacting with your audience?
Yeah, that's a great distinction. So I have taken improv classes, and it's very different than stand-up. Both have been incredibly helpful for me as a business presenter, as a business owner, as a leader, as a coach trainer. Improv is really great training for being present in the moment and trusting your team, because you'll be given a scenario. You didn't have any time to prepare for it. You have to be very present to working off the responses of the people that you're in an improv scene with. And as long as everybody understands the rules of improv and doesn't violate them, you should have a pretty good outcome. And I've, one of the most popular rules that people talk about is the yes and. Well, that makes an important difference, right? If you're in a scene and you ask us, you're one of your colleague actors a question and they say no, it's like, well, now what do I do? So that's why that's an important rule. In stand-up, the importance is really on the preparation and the practice. Yes, you have to be in the moment, because it's fun to deal with hecklers and things like that. But I promise you, there isn't a stand-up comedian who hasn't practiced and prepared for how they will deal with hecklers. They have a million one-liners just ready to go. They will make it look like it's off the top of their head. It is not usually. Maybe, I can't generalize all the time, but that's practice and preparation. And I think from studying both of those arts, I learned things and I was able to incorporate things into my keynote speaking presentations and interactive workshop experiences that make it a much more fun experience for my audience. But because I've learned to practice and prepare and be present, I can't not do that in my business. It's just, it's part of who I am and how I think. And I think it helps everybody learn.
Are you a fan, or were you a fan of The Office, the episode where Michael Scott went to improv class and he was, of course, terrible at it?
Well, do you want to know a dirty little secret, Mark?
Sure.
I actually dated Steve Carell. It's true.
Really? Wow.
I did back in my Chicago days. He was on stage at Second City, and I used to go to all the improv shows. I thought he was so cute, so talented, and had an opportunity to meet him through a nonprofit I was working with. And anyway, that was fun. And yes, he is really funny in real life. But yes, I've watched all the episodes of The Office, and I made up a little secret in my head that when he does a certain smile, he's really saying hello to me.
Well, I think it's funny that somebody like Steve Carell, who is so funny and is so good at improv, could act and do a good job of playing. Michael Scott was not open to what people in his improv class are doing, because he always wanted to like pull a gun out, and like be some sort of gangster or shoot people, which was, of course, getting him kicked out of the improv class.
Well, he is, he plays many characters very well. He's a very talented actor, very talented comedian, writer. So, but we find those people all over in our lives, right? That they're one way, or they think they're being, like they have this secret persona or something. But I don't know. There's, he's a great, or that character anyway, is a great case study for lots of mistakes, lots of mistakes in The Office.
Yeah. Lots of characters in that show making lots of mistakes. But I wanted to ask one other thing, Merit, on your website, there was an interesting line there when you talk about the different sales coaching and training programs that you do. It says, all caps, warning, our programs are not a perfect match for everyone. Now, is that negative reverse selling, or is that just a matter of helping people select the right trainer who's the right fit? I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about why that language is there on the website.
Very insightful. Not everybody picks up on that one. I think it's not, we didn't put that on there to be sort of like a technique-y thing. That is absolutely the truth. We have an allergic reaction to know-it-alls. And so we do everything we can to not work with them. They're not good as part of a community. And we do some public and, group training things. And so it's really important to us to maintain a strong community for our clients, because that just elevates the level for everybody. And so we're really serious about that. There are people over the course of my career that I've said, I wish you the best, and I'm happy to give you some names and numbers. I just don't think that we're going to be a good match, and here's why. And of course, I'm not going to put them down or anything, but there are a number of reasons why we might not be a good match. And sometimes it's more specific to the type of sales process that they're in. We don't do any real work with government, as a vertical, or I don't know, I'm trying to think, like education. That's not one of our sweet spots. There's a lot of nuances to those kinds of businesses. So we just thought better to just lead with what's true which is, really if you want to multitask while you've got some online training course that you just paid for, it makes you feel good, but you're really not going to do anything with it. Like, don't pick us, because we're going to hold people accountable. We want our clients to get results. Our business has traditionally grown through word of mouth. And so it's important to us to be respectful of our clients' time and our expertise. And, we want to do good work in the world. And there's plenty of people out there that could use our help, but everybody's money isn't the same color green.
Yeah. So our guest again today has been Merit Kahn. You can find her website, meritkahn.com, and I'll make sure there's a link in the show notes so you can click on. So it seems like there's this running theme here in the episode of picking the right sales approach for the right moment, choosing the right set of jokes for the right audience or the right time of evening. How young are they? How drunk are they? Who knows? And choosing the right coach to help you in a given situation. So Merit's company, again, is SELLect Sales Development. She has the SELLect Sales System. And as she said earlier, she wants you to stop selling and start being selected. Is that the right recap?
That's perfect. Well done.
So with a name like Merit, I mean, were you tempted to use some sort of pun of like the Merit system?
Yeah, my old business name was Merit-Based Business, so Merit-Based, which was fun. And I actually once dated a guy whose last name is Worthy, so I could have been legitimately merit-worthy. That would have been great for business. But yeah, my parents named me Merit. I don't know how they knew. I mean, merit means worthy of praise. Somehow they knew it right at the first moment. But I've been trying to live up to my name ever since. So it's a good challenge.
Last question for you. Do you probably do remember the mean jokes? Are you willing to share one of them, or do you hold to that moratorium on those jokes?
My mean jokes? Oh, I don't know if I could do those. My coach told me I couldn't. Let's see if I can give you a good one.
And I'm doing the thing that I think stand-ups hate. I don't mean to say like, hey, please be funny. I know you're not like a trained SEAL.
It's tough because every joke has the lead up to it. But I will say that lurking somewhere out there is a link to see my entire one-woman show for free. So if you're really that intrigued and you want to see some good jokes, get in touch with me and I'll get you that link. How's that?
Okay, so we'll share that with folks. I will be curious to go and read that. And my most recent mistake is I shouldn't have put you on the spot for the mean joke, but thank you for sharing the idea that you had them, and we learned a lot about you today, Merit. So thank you for being a guest, and really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Sure.